Hey guys, what's going on? This is Pant our Dragon, and today I want to be doing a video on how to prioritize objectives in League of Legends. So I do feel like a lot of people have trouble taking the right objectives after a team fight or a skirmish, and may sometimes go for the wrong objectives. So what I've designed is a number system which will help you prioritize objectives a bit more. For instance, a tower is worth 2 points, and Baron is worth 6 points. So if you can get 4 towers, which equals 8, it's worth more than getting Baron. And yeah, that's basically how this system will work. And I'll just be talking about in this video why this certain objective is prioritized more than another objective. And so hopefully by the end of this video you will understand what objectives to prioritize in certain scenarios. And I'll also be going over some factors that do come to the mind when you're thinking of taking an objective. And so with all that being said, let's get started. Alright, so disclaimer before we start this video, you shouldn't always go with the system, and sometimes there are situations where doing something else would be much better, but for a majority of games this can be a really good reference. And also just kind of understand where I'm coming from with these points, so you have a better sense of game knowledge in this game. Alright, so first up, Dragon number 5. Dragon number 5 is probably the most important dragon in the game, just because it basically means you should win the next team fight with all the damage and stats it gives you. So the team trying to stop the enemy from taking Dragon number 5 should always contest this objective. Even if they're like 15,000 gold behind, it's still worth it to at least try and stop them from getting this dragon. Fortunately, obtaining Dragon number 5 is very rare in the game. Next up is going to be Baron, the second most highest prioritized objective in the game. So the Baron is basically a power play from Hockey and gives you a lot of map control so that you can take down a lot of objectives, like taking down inhibitor towers and getting inhibitors, taking most of the outer and inner towers around the map, and probably winning your next team fight. Although unlike Dragon, it is very hard to take down, and there should be a lot of caution when taking it, so that is why it is plus 6, and because there will be a situation in this video that I will show where it is better to prioritize 2 objectives instead of Baron. Although Baron can be plus 8 if there's a lot of enemy towers still up, because if you do get the Baron buff, you can basically take down all of their outer and inner towers and just get a huge amount of gold from that power play. So that's why I feel it can be prioritized more than getting multiple objectives around the map. Now I did mention this in the beginning of the video, but outer and inner towers are worth plus 2. I'll just say right now, but I do feel like towers are worth more than getting Dragon number 1, simply because right now in the current meta, you want to snowball the game, so you want map control plus global gold. And I do feel like towers are worth a lot in this current meta we have, so they're very high on the prioritization list when taking objectives. So if you can get like 2 towers, it will be very beneficial to your team. Next up we have inhibitor towers, which give plus 3. The reason inhibitor towers are plus 3 is because it leaves your inhibitor exposed. So the enemy can take that tower and then recall and then come back and probably take the inhibitor. Or if they have Baron, then they absolutely can take it for free. And next up, taking an inhibitor is worth plus 4. And so as you can see, an inhibitor tower plus an inhibitor is actually worth more than a Baron. I'll talk about that later, but we gotta finish this section first. Next up is going to be the Dragon, and in the early game it's actually only worth plus 1, and as you can see, it's actually worth more to take a tower than Dragon number 1. The reason is because Dragon doesn't really give you a lot of stats in the early game. You're going to need some items and levels to actually make use of that percent buff. So yeah, it doesn't really do a lot for your team in the early game. Plus it can be hard to take if the enemy is around. It also puts your jungler a bit behind if they're doing it alone. But if you're in your mid game and you actually have some AD and AP, that's where it's actually worth more. And so let's say the enemy has no Dragon number 1 by 30 minutes. If they actually do get that first dragon, it's actually very beneficial to them since they have the stats. So that's why you can see a little comeback if they actually do get that first dragon, and so you should always stop them from getting it. Even more so in the late game, where if they don't have it by like 40 minutes, then yeah, it's definitely worth more and could be plus 3. Next up is going to be Dragon number 3, which is equal to about plus 2.5. So what this one gives is movement speed, and movement speed is very useful for basically doing anything in the game. Kiting in team fights, chasing down enemies, maneuvering around the map, and yeah, it's very useful, and I do feel like it is worth more than just 1 tower on the map. Now, I kind of want to talk about this clip in general and kind of help you guys on decision making, and so right here I'm actually going for a steal because 1, I know they have no jungler, so I can probably steal it, and number 2, there's no objectives they can take after taking out this dragon. So I do feel like it's a pretty safe decision if I go for the steal, because we don't really lose much and get dragon number 3. But if there were other objectives on the map, and there was like 5 Goonies on the other team right there, they can probably get some towers around the map or get Baron control. So just remember, sacrificing yourself for steals like that can actually help the enemy and win them the game. Next up is going to be the Rift Herald. So the Rift Herald, I do feel like it's worth 1.5 just because the benefits from actually taking the buff is actually pretty good. The only problem I have with it right now is that right now in patch 5.23, there's a bug where hitting the eye won't actually do any true damage. And so it actually takes a while to take it out, and you actually take a lot of damage. So at the moment, I can't really determine its true priority level, but I will definitely put an annotation and update this video when I do figure it out on the next patch if it gets fixed. Because I do know from patch 5.22, it's fairly easy to take down. Next up is going to be the enemy's blue or red. So it only gets plus 0.25. I don't prioritize this too much because, well, it's kind of dangerous to take it. Plus, you aren't really setting the enemy jungler too far behind, as it does give as much experience points as a golem or wraith camp. Unlike in season 1 and 2, and maybe 3, I did forget, it's been a while, where it actually gave a lot of experience. But nonetheless, it is definitely still an objective that gives you an advantage. So take it if you're absolutely sure you can take it. And next up, dragon number 2 is going to be worth plus 0.5. So it is definitely an objective that you should be taking if it's, basically free. But if the enemy is trying to contest this dragon, they don't really necessarily have to always, because it doesn't really give any team fighting stats. All it gives is 15 plus damage to towers and buildings, which is easily doable by winning team fights. So that's why it's not really too important, since no team fight stats. So if you're thinking about contesting this and you're kind of behind, don't worry about it too much. Don't worry about it, it's not worth too much. The only reason you would get it is so you can get dragon number 3 and number 5 eventually. Same goes for dragon number 4. You get minion and monster damage. Yeah, it's not really too great. At this point, you can probably wave clear pretty efficiently. And again, the only reason you'd want this is so you can get closer to that dragon number 5. So it's not worth contesting if you feel like your team is behind. So that is it for the objective list. And some notes you can take off to this is that it's actually worth more to take an inhibitor and an inhibitor tower than Baron, because having an inhibitor down means you can actually have an easier time taking down Baron, as there will be super minions pushing into the enemy base, so they're kind of stuck in your base and you basically have Baron control. Taking Baron can be risky, so that's why I do rate it a bit low, but I designed this table this way for this reason, just to show you guys that it is worth more to take an inhibitor and an inhibitor tower than Baron, because most times, if you're taking Baron, it can be risky if the enemy team is still up, so just do it this way, it's much more safer. Also, I did say this before, but towers are greater than dragon number 1 and 2 and 4 and Rift Scuttler. So most times if you're thinking about getting the dragon, no, get the tower first, then maybe you can get the dragon. As usually after you're taking towers, you're retreating backwards, so you can probably pick up the dragon on the way. So I've told you things to prioritize when taking objectives, but there are always factors to consider when you're taking these certain objectives. So maybe you just want a team fight and you're going to take an inhibitor tower and an inhibitor, but that might not be the right choice in a certain scenario. Like taking the Baron buff, because in this scenario, we actually can't push down an inhibitor tower because there is no minion waves. Sometimes you actually can't get towers and you're going to have to suffice for a dragon or even a Baron. And so that is why prioritization can be shifted to other objectives. Next up is going to be scenarios where you can't get it later. So in this team fight, we're going to win it. But if you look closely at the map, you can see we're down 2 inhibitors and the minion wave isn't really at the enemy's tower. So what would happen if we didn't get Baron in this scenario is they'd probably get it once they respawn, as they do have the map control with the 2 inhibitors down, and there'd be no chance for us to get it, but with the Baron buff we can siege and counter push to the enemy team. So hopefully you understand this example. Next up is going to be death timers. Definitely this is something you should consider when taking down objectives, as it determines how much time you have to take an objective before the enemy can retaliate. So if the death timers are high, you can basically do anything on the map you want and take whatever, like Baron buff or something. Or taking down towers. This is probably a very simple concept that you already know, or don't realize that you already know, and just comes naturally when you play the game. Another thing to think about is the closeness of an objective. So as you can see here, there's a team fight. Spoiler alert, we're gonna win. And the objective we should be taking, according to my little system, would be the Baron. But, as you can see, we're in the bottom lane, so it's a bit far. And so the objectives we take would be the tower, and then we're gonna be taking the next dragon. You wouldn't want to walk all the way from the bottom lane to the Baron if there wasn't a lot of time for you to do that. So naturally, you'd probably be taking down this tower, and then dragon since it's on the way back. Also, death timers are about to end, so I don't think we can actually get the inhibitor turret, unless maybe Jax teleported down here, but who knows. The next factor you have to consider is how much of the enemy's team members are up versus ours. So most times you can contest objectives 5v4, for instance towers, dragons, etc. And the reason behind that is because they'll probably lose a team fight if they try and fight you in that scenario. And so in this scenario, what's happening here is we can actually do this Baron because it is a 5v4, the enemy is actually being pressured by our super minions from the dead inhibitor, and they don't have vision because of our Pinky Dinky ward. And I just summed up my next point, vision and team's position. Yep, you can see in this clip, my team is on the bottom side, and there's not much vision going on at the Baron, so it's very risky for me to actually try and steal and walk up to it, because they'll probably just kill me, especially if I can't sneak around without flash or something of that sort. Usually what happens anyways is if I went in 1v5, I'd probably get zoned off by enemy team by either knockbacks or just straight up killing me, and then contesting the Baron later if they're kinda low. And that's about it for all the factors. So factors, they lead to contestability of an objective. And now we're just going to do a little recap for this video. So for our objective infograph, we have Dragon number 5 giving plus 10, Baron equals plus 6, Baron with a lot of towers up equals plus 8, Outer and Inner towers equals plus 2, Inhibitor towers equals plus 3, Inhibitor equals plus 4, Dragon number 1 early game is plus 1, but if it's mid game, plus 2, Dragon number 3 is equal to plus 2, Rift Scuttler is equal to 1.5, enemies blue or red is equal to 0.25, and Dragon number 2 and 4 is going to be plus 0.5. And next up we're going to be doing a recap of factors when taking objectives, and these factors include closeness of the objective, death timers, how much team members versus enemy members are alive, vision and team's position, scenarios where you can't get it later, and the positioning of a minion wave. Alright, so that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned a lot and you know how to prioritize objectives and the factors that you have to think about when taking down objectives. This video is probably one of my best works I've done in a while, as thinking of a priority system where you guys could understand simply definitely did take a while for me to come up with. But if you guys did actually like this video, make sure to leave a like, and well, if you didn't, then leave a dislike. Maybe it didn't help you, or you have some opinions which don't agree with me, which you can comment below, and I'll definitely try and check it out. See if it's like, I don't know, a great argument. But yeah, thanks guys for watching this video. I am Panther Dragon, and I'll see you guys next time.
What just happened?
I recorded that. That is great.
Oh my god.
What did she do? Yeah.
He just killed her in base.